The bar was the kind that photographed well. Bare bulbs, distressed leather, a curated hum of jazz no one had actually chosen. Williamsburg on a Thursday night, the kind of crowd that looked perpetually mid-sentence, half in love with their own irony. Liam sat across from Sloane, the empty stem of a wineglass between them like a warning. Her phone, face down, still pulsed light from beneath her hand. He knew the moment before she said it. The way she exhaled, rehearsed, as if this conversation had already been storyboarded somewhere else. "You'll never find someone like me." The line hung in the air, too polished, too cinematic to be spontaneous. She didn't flinch, didn't even soften it. Just reached for her clutch, her face lit faintly by the soft glow of the bar's Edison bulbs. She wasn't angry. She was finished. Outside, the rain had begun. Not a storm, just a thin, stubborn drizzle that dampened everything without the drama of thunder. Liam stood under the awning, watching her walk away toward Bedford Avenue, her heels making that confident, rhythmic sound he used to think meant purpose. Tonight, it just sounded like a closing door. He didn't chase her. He couldn't. There was something final in the way her shoulders didn't turn, in how she merged seamlessly into the blur of umbrellas and cab lights. A woman stepping into the next version of herself. A man left holding the silence. Back in his apartment, a small one-bedroom above a bodega where the hum of the fridge competed with the traffic outside. He sat for a long time on the floor, laptop open, the cursor blinking inside their shared playlist. He scrolled through the songs they'd once sent each other at 2 a.m, quiet indie tracks, the kind with lyrics about half-finished lovers and cities that swallow people whole. For a while, he thought about keeping them. Maybe the songs could mean something else now. Maybe memory could be rebranded as taste. But the longer he stared, the smaller he felt. He deleted the playlist, then the photos, then the saved drafts of texts he'd never sent. Each click was its own small funeral. At the studio the next day, he mixed a track for a client who wanted urban melancholy. The irony didn't escape him. His coworkers talked about gigs, streaming numbers, weekend plans. Liam just nodded, layering reverb over an already echoing vocal line, turning noise into something almost beautiful. Silence, he discovered, could be engineered. Weeks passed in increments, coffee stains on sheet music, empty bottles, the ache of absence becoming muscle memory. Her name still showed up on billboards, tagged in collaborations, her face framed in the glow of curated perfection. She'd become a brand. He'd become a footnote. Once, late at night, he found an old clip of her being interviewed at a launch event. She laughed into the microphone, eyes bright, saying something about never settling. The audience clapped, not knowing she'd practiced that line too, probably in the mirror, the same way she'd said goodbye to him. He closed the tab and looked around his dim apartment, the chipped mug, the coiled cables, the silent instruments leaning like loyal witnesses. He realized he didn't want to be her counterexample. He didn't even want revenge. What he wanted was smaller, a day that didn't orbit her. In time, he learned how to make silence his ally. He filled it with work, with sound that wasn't tied to her name. Each mix, each hum of feedback became a new kind of language, one that didn't need to prove, perform, or plead. And somewhere in that quiet, the line she'd thrown like a curse, "You'll never find someone like me," lost its power, not because it wasn't true, but because he'd stopped looking. Brooklyn did what time always does. It kept moving, even when he didn't. The skyline sharpened with new cranes and glass towers. Rents rose like the tides, and Liam stayed. He learned the rhythm of survival. Rent due on the 1st, invoices chased on the 10th. Editing sessions that stretched into mornings where the city's noise became a lullaby instead of a threat. He found steadiness in work that wasn't glamorous. The podcast, Echo Ledger, started in a basement studio with one microphone and a conviction that truth could still matter. Liam designed its soundscapes, hums of subway brakes, the static breath before confession, the low throb of reverb that made a listener's chest tighten just enough to believe. He didn't speak much on air, but his fingerprints were on every pause. He stopped checking Sloane's feeds long before the algorithm stopped suggesting her. Somewhere between one deadline and the next, her face became just another ad he could scroll past without feeling the sting. What replaced her wasn't triumph, but an absence he could live with. Mornings belonged to him now. He'd bike over the Manhattan Bridge when the city was still stretching awake, headlights smeared against the mist, bakery steam curling from vents. The cold air cleared him better than any sermon. No one was watching. No one was curating. Just breath and effort and the quiet hum of his own pulse. Maya entered his life without spectacle. She was part of a nonprofit legal clinic that Echo Ledger had covered for a story about housing discrimination. He'd recorded her interview, steady voice, precise diction, compassion that didn't need an audience. Months later, he saw her again at a fundraiser held in a library reading room, where cheap wine tasted better among the spines of forgotten law books. Their first conversation wasn't cinematic. She complimented his recording equipment. He joked about attorneys who forgot to turn off the HVAC during interviews. But when she laughed, something in him shifted, an old wire humming back to life, not from longing, but recognition. They began to see each other on purpose. Small things, tacos at the corner, place that stayed open past midnight, late walks through Fort Greene Park, Sunday afternoons spent browsing vinyl he could never afford. Maya had a way of listening that didn't demand confession. She didn't ask about the past directly, but when he mentioned once, casually, almost as a test, that someone had told him he'd never find better, Maya only raised an eyebrow and said, "That sounds exhausting." Their love was gentle, almost cautious, as if both had learned how easily care could bruise. They drew their boundaries in deliberate lines. No phones at dinner, no public declarations, no merging lives too soon. She kept her own apartment, filled with half-read books and the smell of bergamot. He liked knowing there were parts of her he'd never fully catalog. Evenings often found them in his kitchen, 2 glasses of cheap red, pots simmering on the stove while an old jazz record spun in the background. They didn't take photos. Once, when he reached for his phone to capture the light falling across her shoulder, Maya shook her head with a small smile. "Let's not," she said. "This doesn't have to prove itself." He understood. Sometimes he would wake before dawn, watch her sleeping beside him, her hand curved near her face, steady breathing like a metronome, and feel a quiet awe at how ordinary peace could look. There was no rush, no performance, just the steady, unphotographed grace of 2 people trying not to hurt each other. Work grew steadier too. The podcast gained traction, sponsors, recognition. Listeners wrote that the sound design made them feel the truth. Liam took pride in that. The invisible labor of shaping silence until it told its own story. He didn't crave fame, only the clean satisfaction of doing a thing well. At night, when the city hummed below and Maya slept in the next room, He would sit at his desk and listen to a mix on repeat. City noise fading into rain, a heartbeat beneath a confession. His work had become a mirror, imperfect, but honest. This was the smaller life he'd built, unremarkable to anyone else but true in a way his old one never was. And if sometimes on rare nights he caught himself thinking of Sloane, her voice, her ambition, the way she weaponized light, he let the thought pass like background static. What mattered now wasn't the woman who'd left, but the quiet he'd learned to stay inside. It started as a whisper on industry blogs, an exposé about a luxury label accused of exploiting freelance models and silencing complaints. At first, Sloane's name wasn't mentioned, but her image, shimmering in their campaigns, voiceover dripping with empowerment slogans, was everywhere. Within a week, hashtags turned, screenshots resurfaced. Someone unearthed an old video where she told a room of wide-eyed interns, "Integrity isn't a luxury, it's a brand value." The clip went viral, then carnivorous. Liam saw it by accident. A producer at Echo Ledger sent it in the group chat, captioned "Influencer Meltdown Incoming." He watched without responding. Her voice sounded different now, too rehearsed, too clean. He remembered that tone. It had once been aimed at him. For 2 days, the internet chewed on her. Reaction videos, think pieces, commentary from people who had never met her but spoke like witnesses. Then, just as fast, the conversation shifted to whether she'd issue a statement, whether she'd own her part, or double down. The cycle was brutal, predictable, and strangely mesmerizing. He closed the tab, leaned back in his chair, and felt the faint echo of something he couldn't name. Was it pity or the ghost of old humiliation turning over in its grave? Maya noticed his distance that evening while they cooked. "Rough day?" she asked, slicing onions with surgical precision. "Just noise," he said, but his voice betrayed him. Later, as they ate, she studied him. "You saw her name again, didn't you?" He nodded. Maya didn't push. That was her gift. She left space for truth to enter on its own. That night, the email arrived. Subject line, "Hey stranger. Long time." He stared at it for a long time before opening. Sloane's message was polished, perfectly weighted between contrition and control. She mentioned the unfortunate controversy, how the internet loves to forget nuance. She said she was planning a reflective video about accountability and personal growth, and thought it might be healing for both of them if they appeared together. "Not to revisit the past," she wrote, "but to show people how maturity looks when two exes can meet with grace. It could help both our narratives." Liam almost laughed, but the sound caught in his throat. Our narratives. The phrase was so clean, so brand safe, that it left no room for the messy things that had actually happened. The betrayal, the manipulation, the months he'd spent wondering what was wrong with him. He read the email twice, then a third time, trying to locate any trace of genuine remorse. All he found was strategy, SEO sincerity, the grammar of survival. He didn't answer. But the next morning, she texted. A simple line. "I'm not your villain, Liam. I'm just trying to make things right." He felt something twist inside him. Anger, yes, but also fatigue. How easily she repackaged everything, even her own guilt, into a narrative she could monetize. Still, a part of him was curious. What did she look like now, off camera? Was there any real person left beneath the curated gloss? He told himself he didn't care. But that night, he scrolled through her latest posts. Crisis management chic. Minimal makeup, a neutral sweater, captions about taking accountability and using the moment to grow. The comments were divided, some supportive, some cruel. It was theater, as always. When he mentioned it to Maya, she listened quietly, then said, "If you ever meet her, make sure it's not on her stage." Liam smiled faintly. "That's assuming I'll meet her at all." But the thought lingered. The idea of confronting Sloane, not to give her what she wanted, but to look her in the eye without shrinking this time, tugged at him. In the days that followed, Echo Ledger began drafting an episode on influencer culture and moral posturing. His team didn't know his history with Sloane. They just knew her story fit the theme. Her name was back in his workspace again, in audio clips and transcripts, her voice weaving through the same frequencies he worked in. At night, as he adjusted volume levels, he listened to her laugh, her pauses, her perfect diction. Every syllable was a performance. And he realized the algorithm had come full circle, not just hers, but his too. The past had found its way back, dressed in the language of redemption. When her assistant finally emailed to formalize a potential collaboration, Liam didn't delete it. He saved it in a folder titled Noise. Then he went back to work, layering sound over silence until her voice disappeared again beneath his own. He hadn't realized how smell could summon ghosts until he walked past the old wine bar on a cold February night. The door was different now. New signage, same warm spill of light, but the air still carried that faint mix of cedar, citrus, and nostalgia. For a moment he almost saw them again. Sloane leaning in, glass in hand, voice low enough to make him lean closer, not realizing she was already half gone. The memories began to loosen, unspooling like film left too close to heat. The lies came back not as sentences, but as sensations. The buzz of her phone lighting up at midnight, the smile she'd give before turning it face down, the way she'd call some nights late work dinners and others networking. He had believed her, mostly because he wanted to. When she finally confessed, no, justified, the affair as professional alignment, the words had been so clean they almost sounded logical. Now, hearing her name again in conference rooms and podcast rundowns, the old ache didn't arrive as pain but as static, a low hum beneath the day. Maya noticed it before he said a word. They were in her apartment, small and neat, walls lined with law books and a fiddle-leaf fig that refused to thrive. She was making tea, her hair still damp from a late shower, when she said quietly, "She's not just in the news, is she?" Liam looked up, caught. "What do you mean?" "You're editing her voice again," Maya said. "In your head, I mean." He almost denied it, then stopped. There was no point lying to someone who listened for a living. "She reached out," he said finally. "Wants to meet. Says it's about closure. A video." Maya poured the tea, slid a mug toward him. "And you're thinking about saying yes. It's not that simple. It never is." Her tone wasn't sharp. It was weary, the kind of fatigue that comes from watching people you love try to negotiate with old pain. "She says it's not about the past," he added, half to himself, "that it's about showing growth." Maya sipped her tea. "Growth doesn't usually need witnesses." The sentence landed quietly, like a verdict. That night he couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, headphones on, replaying old recordings of ambient city sound, rain on scaffolding, the soft groan of subway rails. It was a trick he used when his mind wouldn't quiet. But beneath the noise, His thoughts drifted. The first time Sloane had called him steady, like it was both a compliment and a limitation. The staged, candid photos she'd posted with captions about creative mornings that had really been their arguments edited into aesthetic fragments. He'd once been part of her brand, whether he admitted it or not. When dawn came, pale and cold, he wrote back to her. "If we meet, it's off camera. One time. No filming, no posts, just talk." The reply came within minutes. "Deal. I just want to make peace." He didn't believe her, but he didn't delete the thread either. Maya found him later that morning in the kitchen, pouring cereal like someone practicing normalcy. She set her briefcase down and said, "I don't need you to be noble. Just be honest. With me, with yourself." He met her gaze. There was no accusation there, only clarity. "I'm not trying to prove anything," he said. "I just need to see if I'm still small in her presence." Maya nodded once. "Then go. But remember, you don't owe her a narrative." That evening, as he prepared to leave for the meeting, he caught his reflection in the mirror by the door. The city light made him look older, steadier, like someone who'd been rebuilt quietly, without permission. He thought of all the years he'd spent mistaking silence for peace, forgiveness for forgetting. Maybe this was neither. Maybe it was just confrontation, stripped of theater. He left his phone in the kitchen drawer before stepping out soon. The night was crisp, the streets washed clean by an earlier drizzle. As he walked toward the cafe where they'd agreed to meet, he realized what he wanted wasn't closure. It was proof that he could finally face the ghost without lighting her. The email thread arrived at 2:13 a.m., forwarded from an anonymous source with no greeting, only the subject line. "For your story on image management, this might interest you." Attached was a compressed folder named mercerarchive.zip. Liam almost ignored it. Anonymous leaks were common in investigative media, most of them useless, fabrications, vendettas, or noise from people hoping for attention. But something in the phrasing made him pause. Image management. That was her world, Sloane Mercer's. He opened it. Hundreds of emails unfurled like a confession typed in slow motion. The language was unmistakably hers, precise, breezy, performative. She had laid out strategies with her publicist for months before their breakup. "We need a narrative pivot," one message read. "Personal authenticity sells, but I'm plateauing. The audience loves heartbreak arcs, especially if framed as empowerment." Another, dated only a week before she'd left him, mentioned leveraging timing with the product launch and positioning as a woman reclaiming herself. Then came a document titled Relationship Content Plan. It wasn't rumor. It was an outline. Dates, captions, emotional beats. He was itemized, reduced to a brand function. Partner fatigue, creative differences, silent growth period, reemergence with new brand alignment. Liam stared at the screen, heart thrumming in his throat. The betrayal had always hurt, but this was different. This was architecture. She hadn't just left him. She'd scheduled it. The studio's fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting his face in intervals of shadow and clarity. On another monitor, sound waves from an unfinished episode pulsed, waiting for him to balance their volume. He minimized the session window and read another email. Sloane's tone was warm, practiced, full of the faux intimacy she reserved for the camera. "We'll both come out looking strong. He's a good guy, but emotionally flat, easy to redirect." He stopped reading. For a long time, the only sound was the low hum of the servers cooling beside his desk. The next morning, he brought the files to the editorial meeting. The Echo Ledger team, 5 people in a windowless room filled with half-drunk coffee and cables, was electrified. "This is it," said Jasmine, their producer, eyes gleaming. "It's not just scandal, it's cultural commentary, influencer ethics, emotional exploitation, the whole ecosystem." Eddie, their host, tapped his pen against his notebook. "We've got corroboration here. Dates, brand invoices, her PR agent's CCs. We can verify it in days. Liam, what do you think?" What did he think? That this was justice, finally? That the woman who had turned him into a narrative would now be trapped inside one she couldn't control? He wanted to feel satisfaction, but all he felt was exhaustion. The evidence didn't bring closure. It just confirmed how thoroughly he'd been a prop. He hesitated long enough for Jasmine to lean forward. "We run it. This is our biggest story yet." Liam folded his arms. "She's already collapsing under the public eye," he said. "We'd just be throwing stones at the rubble." "This isn't about her. It's about the system she represents," Eddie countered. But he wasn't convinced. He could see Sloane's face already, framed in 1,000 thumbnails. The crying apology video, the reaction breakdowns, the re-uploads dissecting every syllable. She'd be viral again. This time crucified instead of crowned. And he'd be the invisible hand behind it. When the meeting ended, Jasmine stayed, behind. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded, but the motion felt mechanical. She tilted her head. "You don't have to protect her, you know. This could be cathartic." He looked at the folder still open on his laptop, the file names gleaming like tiny weapons. "Catharsis and cruelty look too much alike," he said quietly. That evening, he uploaded the folder to a private cloud drive, labeling it simply Archive. Then he locked it with a password only he knew. The decision wasn't clean. It felt like standing on a fault line between integrity and vengeance. At home, Maya found him sitting in the dark, laptop closed, hands clasped. She waited before speaking. "You found something," she said. He met her eyes. "Proof that it was never real. Not the way I thought." "Do you want it public?" "I don't know what I want." Maya crossed the room, sat beside him, and rested her hand on his shoulder. "Then don't move yet. Wait until you do." He nodded, grateful for her calm. Outside, the city murmured its usual insomnia. Sirens, laughter, rain on glass. Somewhere in the cloud, the folder sat waiting, heavy with truths that could destroy or redeem, depending on who told them first. And for the first time, Liam understood that power wasn't just in what you expose. Sometimes, it was in what you chose to withhold. They met in a quiet cafe near Union Square, one of those places designed to feel intimate but impersonal. Matte lighting, slow jazz, the smell of espresso strong enough to cover unease. Sloane arrived 10 minutes late, wearing what he recognized as her contrition uniform. Soft beige, bare makeup, a delicate chain at her throat. Everything about her was curated to seem uncurated. "Liam," she said, breathless as she slid into the booth across from him. "God, it's been forever." He nodded, not smiling. The years had sharpened her beauty into something colder, more deliberate. She looked like a woman who had learned to calibrate every expression to read as authenticity. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she began. "I know it's weird given everything, but I thought—" "Stop rehearsing," he said quietly. "We both know you practice this." Her mouth froze open for a fraction of a second before she recovered. I'm trying to do the right thing here. He took a sip of his coffee. Doing the right thing usually doesn't require an audience. She flinched, but only slightly. You think I'm being performative? I think you're being consistent. For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick as static. Outside, cabs hissed through rain. Inside, the air felt taut with old ghosts. Finally, she sighed. Look, I made mistakes. I hurt people. I can admit that. But the internet has turned me into a villain, and that's not fair. I'm trying to rebuild something. I just thought maybe you'd want to be part of that closure, to show we can both move on. He studied her face, the careful vulnerability, the practiced tremor in her voice. Once he might have believed it. Once he did. I read the emails, Sloane, he said. Her composure cracked. What emails? The ones you archived. The ones where you called me emotionally flat and timed our breakup with your product launch. She stared at him, color draining. How? Doesn't matter how. What matters is that I know what it was. And now you know that I know. The cafe's hum seemed to drop a register. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sloane straightened, her mask faltering, but not falling. So this is what, revenge? You're going to leak them? He shook his head. No. That's theater. I'm done being part of your stories. Then what do you want? She asked, her voice low, almost pleading. Terms. He leaned forward. Not closure, not performance. Here's what happens if you want to walk away with any integrity left. She blinked, wary. First, he said, you credit the people you erased. The interns, the photographers, the stylists you cut out of your speeches. Publicly, cleanly, no footnotes. Second, you pay restitution, quietly, off record. You know what you owe. Her jaw tightened. And third, you step back from the panels, from the think pieces, the talks about integrity and influence. You don't get to lecture on ethics while your inbox reads like a strategy manual for manipulation. She let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. So you get to dictate my career now? No, he said. I'm giving you a way to end the story without being devoured by it. Her eyes searched his face, looking for weakness. And what do you get out of it? Peace, he said simply. And the promise that I won't use what I know. You get to rebuild, but not on the backs of the people you buried. She leaned back, crossing her arms, the performance flickering again. You're still moralizing. You always did think you were above all this. He smiled faintly. No, I just finally know what I won't be part of. For a moment, she looked at him as if seeing him clearly for the first time, not as a prop or a mistake to spin, but as someone she could no longer manipulate. The realization unsettled her more than anger would have. Do we shake on it? She asked quietly. No cameras, he said. No captions. Just an agreement between two people who finally ran out of illusions. She nodded, her eyes glistening, not with tears, but with the fragile awareness of consequence. You've changed, she murmured. He stood, leaving enough cash on the table for both drinks. No, he said. I just stopped performing. When he stepped back into the rain, the city light fractured on the pavement. For the first time, he didn't feel the weight of her behind him. The deal wasn't redemption. It was release. And that, he decided, was enough. The city had entered its wet season. Those gray weeks when everything felt half erased, the skyline dissolving into mist, the streets reflecting fragments of neon. At the studio, the air hummed with quiet urgency. The Echo Ledger team was circling the story like wolves scenting blood. The leaked emails, Sloane's crumbling brand, the moral theater of it all. It was the perfect convergence of outrage and fascination. They called it The Ethics of Image, a special episode that could anchor their next season. Liam sat at the mixing desk, watching the sound levels rise and fall as the team discussed voiceover scripts and pacing. He had stayed mostly silent, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the monitor. Jasmine had already drafted a teaser trailer. Eddie was scripting the opener. In a world where virtue is marketable, what happens when the brand of integrity breaks? The line made Liam's stomach turn. He knew this was journalism. He also knew it was spectacle. When Maya arrived that evening, the studio was half lit, the air thick with ambition. She took in the whiteboard scrawled with episode notes, Sloane's name at the center like a target, and looked at him. "Is this what you want?" He hesitated. "It's what the team wants." "That's not what I asked." Liam exhaled. "If we air it, we're telling the truth." "Whose truth?" she asked quietly. "Theirs or yours?" He turned away, unable to answer. Maya walked closer, her voice calm but unyielding. "You don't owe her silence, but you don't owe the internet another performance either." Later that night, he sat alone, headphones on, playing the rough cut. Her voice filled the room. The clips, the apology snippets, the dissected PR emails. The sound waves danced across his screen, but all he heard was noise. The same noise that had defined her world, and once his. He shut it down. The next morning, he called Sloane. When she answered, her tone was brittle, like glass held too long in the sun. "If this is about the episode, Liam, please, don't let them do this. You know how it'll look." "I know exactly how it'll look," he said. "You made a career out of how things look." Silence. Then, softly, "You said you wouldn't leak anything." "I haven't. Yet." A pause. "Then what do you want from me?" "The same terms as before," he said. "Credit, restitution. You step away from the integrity circuit." She gave a strained laugh. "You think that's going to fix me?" "No," he said. "It's not about fixing you. It's about stopping the damage." There was a rustle on her end. Maybe pacing. Maybe tears she refused to let fall. "They'll destroy me," she whispered. "You've been living on borrowed narratives for years," he replied. "Maybe it's time to live with the truth." When they met again, it wasn't in a cafe this time, but in a small office borrowed from the podcast's legal department. Fluorescent light, neutral walls, 2 folders on the table. Maya stood near the door, silent witness. Sloane looked smaller than he remembered, her posture defensive, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the documents. The papers detailed everything. A written acknowledgement to those she had erased, signed transfers for private restitution payments, and a final clause agreeing to withdraw from her pending speaking engagements on ethics and accountability. She skimmed, her breath uneven. "You've thought of everything." "I've had time," he said. Her eyes darted up. "And if I don't sign?" "Then the episode airs." Jasmine's voice echoed faintly from the hall, though she wasn't inside. Liam didn't look at her. He didn't need to. The implication hung heavy in the air. Sloane's composure faltered. For the first time, she looked genuinely frightened, not of exposure, but of irrelevance. The silence stretched long enough for the hum of the overhead light to become unbearable. Finally, she picked up the pen. As she signed, her voice was barely audible. "You win." Liam shook his head. "This isn't a win. It's a record." She finished the last signature, pushed the papers forward, and sat back. Her mascara had begun to smudge, not dramatically, just enough to make her look human again. "Will you air the episode?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Not the one they want. Maybe a smaller one. About systems, not names." Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. She just nodded once, resigned. When they left the room, Maya reached for his hand. He didn't realize until then how tightly he'd been clenching it into a fist. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city's air smelled metallic and clean, as if something had been scrubbed raw. Sloane disappeared into a waiting car without looking back. Maya squeezed his hand gently. "You didn't save her," she said. "You just refused to destroy her." Liam looked up at the wet light spilling through the clouds. "Maybe that's the same thing," he murmured. Back at the studio, he opened a new file and began mixing silence into sound again. Measured, patient, deliberate. The episode would still air, but stripped of spectacle, of blood. It would be what it should have been from the start. A hearing of facts, not feelings. When the episode finally aired, it did so without fanfare. No promotional blitz, no teaser trailer promising redemption or ruin. The title was plain, Conflicts of Interest, and the voiceover never said her name. It wasn't about Sloane anymore. It was about the machinery. How stories get packaged. How sincerity becomes product. How apologies turn into currency. Her voice, once a weaponized melody of charm, appeared only in passing, de-identified, woven into a larger commentary about media and ethics. Listeners called it subtle. Some said anticlimactic. The team expected outrage. Instead, the episode passed like a low tide, leaving behind quiet ripples of thought. No one went viral. Liam didn't trend, and that was the point. The folder of emails stayed in the encrypted drive, untouched. Jasmine had wanted a post-mortem episode, something about behind-the-scenes restraint, but Liam refused. He didn't need the internet to congratulate him for not setting someone on fire. He had learned that silence, when chosen, was not weakness, but authorship. Weeks later, when the studio received an award nomination, he skipped the ceremony. Instead, he and Maya rode the ferry to Staten Island at dusk, sitting on the deck with paper cups of cheap coffee and a blanket she'd brought in her tote. The air was cool, salted, and unfilmed. The skyline shimmered in the distance, still arrogant, still beautiful. Maya leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever think about what she's doing now?" she asked softly. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Not often." "She'll resurface," Maya said. "People like her always do. New name, new purpose." "Maybe," he said. "But maybe she'll stay quiet for a while. Do something that doesn't need to be posted." Maya smiled faintly. "That would be a miracle." They both laughed, the kind of laughter that releases something rather than hides it. Across the city, Sloane had indeed gone quiet. Her accounts were dormant, her partnerships dissolved. In a small studio downtown, she began consulting anonymously for nonprofits, drafting grant language, ghostwriting statements for others. She no longer appeared on panels about ethical influence. Her work became invisible by design. Whether it was remorse or fatigue didn't matter. She was, for once, unobserved. Liam found out months later from an email she sent. Brief, formal, almost tender. Thank you for handling it with restraint. I'm learning. Slowly. Hope you're well. He didn't reply. He didn't delete it either. It sat there, unread but acknowledged, like a stone marking where something used to burn. Life didn't become cinematic after that. It became real, predictable in the best way. Maya's cases grew heavier but more rewarding. Liam taught an evening class in audio storytelling at the community college. Their apartment filled with things that weren't curated. Chipped mugs, a growing stack of novels, half-wilted flowers from the corner shop. Sometimes he still woke early, before the city's first siren, and sat by the window watching dawn erase the skyline. He thought about the strange mercy of unrecorded hours, about how much of life happens outside the frame. When Echo Ledger's new season launched, his name appeared quietly in the credits, beneath sound design. He liked it that way. No interviews, no panels, no essays about healing. Just the hum of life continuing. There was a time when he'd wanted vindication, a headline, a reckoning, a line that would finally make her see. But now he understood. Revenge wasn't spectacle. It was stability. It was waking up next to someone who knew the difference between love and leverage. He closed his laptop, the city now gold with morning. From somewhere below, a street musician played a slow, wandering saxophone, the kind of song that doesn't chase applause. Maya stirred behind him. "You're up early," she murmured. "Couldn't sleep," he said. She reached for his hand without opening her eyes. "Then come back to bed. You've already done enough for one lifetime." He smiled, letting her pull him back under the covers, the city still humming outside. No cameras, no captions, just breath, warmth, and the steady truth of staying. The story wasn't redemption or revenge. It was release. And that, he thought, was the quietest kind of victory, a life that needed no edits.